Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. AlphaList is a closed community with over 400 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is kindly sponsored by Okta Customer Identity Management. If you're transforming into a digital platform and are facing identity management challenges, listen closely now, because Okta offers the market-leading solution to help you make identity and access management work as a service. A platform that offers endless ways to connect with your employees and customers. Get support for your most important customer-facing initiatives. Integrate identity and access into every app and create secure and engaging experiences in no time by outsourcing workforce or customer identity management to Okta. Get started in 15 minutes and test IAM or CM as a service. Create frictionless registrations and login experiences for your applications and make identity the foundation for your zero trust strategy and enable access for all users regardless of their location, device, or network. Visit alphalist.com/Okta to try it out. In an upcoming episode, I talk to Zagnik Nandi, Okta CTO, about everything identity management. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is Andreas. And Andreas is the CTO of Scalable Capital. And Scalable Capital is a company from Munich that collected 250 million in funding. They are a neo broker and a robo-advisor. So that's like quite a new market, as like neo broker already suggests. And he has like quite a lot experience in building apps also from his past and in app security. And that's why I wanted to talk about the topic of app security in the regulated financial market and what you have to do. So welcome, Andreas. Anything to add there?
Thanks, Toby, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast today. Yeah, about app security. In fact, I already quite a while ago had a talk at the very popular Berlin iOS developer conference, UIConf, about app security. And app security and what I say in that talk is also very relevant. App security and securing apps and the whole awareness about security, your front ends, your back ends, your processes is essential, not just in the financial market, but in any app, in any offering, in fact. But of course, in the financial market, in the financial services business, as Scalable Capital is in that business, it's particularly relevant as we are also regulated and we are audited quite regularly by various authorities in Germany, in the United Kingdom, and by independent auditors, and we are also being pen tested every year. So this is a very significant focus of ours, and and it should be.
Yeah, I also had various touch points with that topic. Just like out of curiosity, I once tried a tool called Charles Proxy, which is kind of a nice UI proxy for macOS, which you can easily install, and even dig in the middle of SSL encrypted connections if you did it wrong. And that's kind of a nice experience to just use it with apps you just want to use or just regularly use on your mobile phone and just understand how insecure it is. It's really interesting. But before we deep dive into that topic, can you tell us a bit more about like your career as a nerd or geek? So what is your nerd journey or nerd path?
Well, I started my career as a nerd, I would say, very early, with a very young age, playing around with a basic computer of my father's, who did adult education, a continuous education program back then, and it very early in my days kind of draw a path towards technology, engineering, the sciences. And eventually after my A grades, I started to study computer science at the Technical University in Graz. Very, let's say, very hardware near. So it was very electrical engineering, computer science combined. I moved into digital signal processing. I programmed FPGAs and was very hardware near. Then also moved into the topic of embedded systems, which I then focused on at ETH Zurich, where I did my PhD in multi-core resource sharing systems, so AKA embedded systems with multi-core chips, which was a new thing back then, together with Airbus and Bosch, and from there I moved into the topic of mobile applications. It was basically the next thing from embedded systems. What's the closest thing to embedded systems? It's the new thing that came up back then, the smartphone. And I found that very interesting and very intriguing from the beginnings. Having this very powerful computer in your pocket, even though many people, back then didn't see a bright future for that kind of device, and kind of the Nokia communicator wasn't that successful, right? And then this new device that didn't even have a keyboard from this company called Apple. But for me, this was very interesting. For me, this was very intriguing, and I jumped into that and jumped into mobile development, and it was very, very interesting for me. And my background in electrical engineering, in hardware near programming, was also very useful in dealing with limited system resources and working in this very integrated system, right? So and the rest is basically then history, right? Then I moved into app development and in financial services. I worked for Avaloq in Zurich. I continued then. I joined this small startup that in the travel industry called Get Your Guide, not so small anymore these days, right? And built a mobile app there, and then moved to Scalable Capital in 2015, and since then I'm on quite a ride with Scalable Capital.
And now you're building a broker, or what does Scalable Capital do exactly? I mean, which parts of the value chain do you own, and where does the technical complexity come from?
Yeah. So Scalable Capital started in 2015 as a digital wealth management company. And this is also very well known as robo-advisor. And we started in Germany and in the UK with offering ETF portfolios, risk-managed ETF portfolios for our clients, starting from a minimum investment amount of 10,000 euros or 10,000 pounds in the UK. And by applying our risk management algorithms, observe the market, observe the clients' portfolios, and then according to the risk appetite of our clients, automatically rebalance those portfolios in order to satisfy our clients' risk settings with which they signed up. We then quickly moved also into the B2B market, where we built wealth management solutions for other institutional companies, so other banks. We have an integration with ING here in Germany, but we also have other businesses around Europe and in Germany here, Oscar.de, Targo Bank, Barclays in the UK, Open Bank, Santander daughter in Spain, Raiffeisen Bank in Austria. So quite large players in their respective markets, which built for whom we built digital wealth management solutions. We then also got the feedback from our clients that they want to do more with us, that they want to basically, be able to also put money into fixed term accounts, but also be able to trade directly and make their own decisions, which is not possible in the wealth management piece, right? And this basically brought us to the conviction that we also need to build a broker. And that's a very different business, a very different application in terms of architecture and requirements from an engineer's point of view.
It sounds way more complex, right? It sounds way more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not only more complex. There's the complexity part, and there's also the scalability part, right? So if you look at the digital wealth management offering, you have the algorithm, you have the interaction with the bank and the market data. The complexity is there, but in the user interface, it's not that complex, right? The user interface is more or less static. It updates once a day, and people can't make any decisions. So they more or less can watch their performance, can watch their portfolio, maybe can make a few changes on certain settings, but that's really it. A broker is completely different. A broker is very real time. So market data being pushed through the user interface in real time, streamed to the user interface, the app or the web application, and clients being very interactive. Buying, selling, canceling, updating limits and stuff like that. Searching asset universe with tens of thousands of instruments. And all those requests not coming from a, let's say, small audience, but from a really big audience from a retail perspective, right? So there are much more clients, much more users on a broker than there are on a wealth management offering. So scalability-wise, much more complex, technology-wise, and real-time requirements-wise, much more complex.
So to sum it up, you were bored.
Not exactly bored, but we heard the requirements, we heard the request, we heard the need, and we saw ourselves in a good position to actually serve that need, right? We had a technology stack that already allowed us to build systems not only for us, but also for white label partners. So from a component structure and from a setup of asynchronous microservices that communicate with each other, we've been in a good situation. And many elements of a broker are very similar to the wealth management piece. You need some bookkeeping, you need some performance computation, you need charts, you need asset data, all those things we already had. Of course, on top of that, we had to build quite another set of services to also integrate with the stock exchange, being able to directly execute through trades that originate from our clients, not from our algorithms. But the technology is itself in the cloud, Amazon Web Services, microservices that communicate with each other using message queues in an asynchronous manner. We're already very well prepared for that step, and we're in fact able to handle those requirements that the broker actually has, right?
And just to understand it correctly, what happens if I hit buy on, like, let's say an Amazon stock? What happens? So I guess your app sends a signal to your backend, and what does your backend then do? I mean, how does it end up in a physical ownership of this stock?
Yeah. So there are quite a few things that happen here, right? So there is you hit the buy button, and then a certain number of checks actually happen. Do you actually have the funds to buy that stock? And then there's a compliance step that checks this in a second layer, and then this order of yours is translated in a certain message format that we can actually transmit to the bank. Then this is transmitted to the bank. Then there's a feedback from the bank, actually, from the market maker, about the execution of the trade, whether it's executed, not executed, partially executed, for which price has it been executed, and all that information we gather then again, we put it in your personal portfolio. We book it according to the information we get from the market maker, and then visualize it in the context of your portfolio as a position, but also in the context of your overall position. We have to adjust your so-called buying power. So what are the remaining funds basically that are open, that are available to you to execute other buy orders, and then the trade is done, right? And then there's a document coming for the trade that's also being put in the according place in your system. We have to check whether you have any alarms, any price alarms for the trade, because in our system you can also set up alarms. You can say, hey, notify me when the Amazon stock that you mentioned hits a certain level or drops below a certain level, and all those things, right?
Okay, understood. And and the bank you're working with, does that bank actually store the money in a way, or has responsibility for the money at the end, or do you have responsibility? If I send you like 10K euros that I want to buy stocks with, is it stored somewhere? Is the number 10K for Tobias, is it then stored somewhere in your database, or is it stored at the bank?
So you have to differentiate what about the database and who is in the responsibility and the liability for that money, right? So when you open an account with us, we open an account for you in your name at our partner bank here in Munich, Sparda Bank. And we open a cash account for you, and we open a deposit, a depot, a securities account for you. And the money that you transfer to us physically, if you want, is with Baader Bank, right? And this is a bank with a banking license, and you have a thing called Einlagensicherung, and all the protection that as a client in Germany that you actually have, right? When you then execute a trade, we execute that trade from that account with Baader, because you actually gave us a power of attorney to do these things for you, right?
So you essentially built the interface for like a better interface for Sparda Bank. I mean, don't mean it badly, but like if someone,
it's not a better interface, because this is an offering that the bank itself doesn't have, right? It's really, we facilitate the banking infrastructure in order to build a completely new offering and put that together for you. Also in a pricing perspective, right? You pay us for that service and not the bank, right? And we pay the bank for their services to us, for their custody services to us, right? And once you buy that stock, coming back to your trade, right? Once you buy that stock is being paid with the money that you have at this cash account at the partner bank, and we do make sure that you have enough funds to actually buy that stock, and the bank, in fact, does that again. So there's a double layer of security here, right? And once the trade is executed successfully, it is in your personal securities account in your depot at the partner bank again, right? And again, we get the data from the bank directly after the trade, but also in a daily reconciliation. So basically in a daily synchronization process with the bank. And that's what you then can see in our interface, right? One piece of Amazon stock for that and that price, and the current price is like that, and that's your performance, right?
Understood.
Yeah.
And as we wanted to talk about app security, I want to come to my central question, which is, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, what can go wrong in terms of app security?
Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, right? Murphy's Law. No, there are a lot of layers in those systems, and systems are becoming more and more complex, and more interactive systems are working with each other to actually build an attractive offering for our clients. And every interface in that chain, the app, the API, the backend, an identification layer, authorization layer, the connectivity to a market data service, the connectivity to the market maker or the bank. I mean, all those are interfaces that have to communicate with each other, that have to ID each other, that have to make sure that only the necessary amount of information flows through those interfaces, that have to be up to date and that are exposed on the internet and are subject to vulnerabilities and to scans and to attacks. And the first step is basically get an overview and have really an inventory of all those interfaces, of all those vectors that you can have, right? And then in every interface, in every item on that inventory list, you need to go through possible attack vectors, in-house, external, clients, all those things that can possibly be exploited, right?
And just looking at the app and the security between app and API, what are the typical things to look at there?
Yeah, this is so-called the endpoint, right? And the endpoint is always the most difficult part, because this is the part where you have no control whatsoever, right? It's the device owned by the user. You install an app there. You don't exactly know where your app is basically being installed in. Is it a jailbroken device? Is it an updated? Is it an up-to-date version of the operating system? Are vulnerabilities present in that system? Is maybe the user themselves compromised? So, AKA, the device stolen, is the PIN code known to an attacker, and so from that point of view, that's the most difficult endpoint, and it's also important there to do what you can in order to make sure that you have proper identity and that you avoid situations where information can leak. And you mentioned the Charles proxy at some point, and this is kind of the whole system. The whole system there is, how do I protect the communication of that application with my endpoints? And before you are even there, how do I establish identity, right? And those are the two very crucial elements. And once you have that, is what happens on the device? Do I need to store data? How can I store data, or should I store data in the first place? And if yes, how do I make sure the data is properly secured? That means encrypted, right? Those are the particular challenges when you talk about app security, or also securing or hardening apps, right?
And how do you make sure that how do you actually achieve that? I mean, practical. How do you make sure that identity is valid, And how do you protect your endpoints or the communication between API and server?
So identity is something where we there are well established methods with how you actually do the whole identity, and we are also looking into a lot of options here. Right now, it's username, password, but it's not you can only it's not stored on the device, but if you want to store it, it's kind of stored in the secure element of a device, right, and not in the user preferences, so to say. If you then, when you then communicate with your endpoint, use methods like SSL pinning. So, for example, in our app, we use SSL pin. This avoids attacks like man-in-the-middle attacks and really classics in you are at Starbucks, use a Wi-Fi, you look at your and you might be subject to man-in-the-middle attacks, right? Then in your actual API communication, be frugal with the data, right? What is the data that you actually transmit? And don't add data points that are somewhat part of your object model maybe, or part of your internal object model, but which you actually don't need, right? I think if you look at other big hacks, there was a setup once where somebody was able to reset his Apple ID by using information he found on an Amazon account from somebody else, right? So and that information was somehow available, and through the dissemination or the usage of that piece of data, he was able to attack a completely different account, right? So with Apple, and this became then public and was changed accordingly. But also for us, it's important that we don't have data fields in our API that we actually don't need, that serve no purpose. But as it so happens sometimes, as a developer, as a backend developer designing an API, you have your object model, you have your database scheme, and you design an API for a certain endpoint, and then you add all those fields that you have.
Yeah,
right?
It just exposes everything, and and
there's lots of, let's say, tools that actually do that for you, and you just keep using that, right? And while those tools are all great for proof of concepts, experimenting, you have to be careful with those tools, and this is part of a secure software development process, to actually look in every single endpoint and API and be sure I'm not exposing anything that is actually there for convenience at some point and maybe useful in a testing environment, but it's not necessary, right?
I would say it's very, very harmful. And I know like a few examples. If you just, I don't know if it's still the case today, or if more and more apps use certificate pinning, which kind of makes it harder from my perspective. But if you just like open Charles and a few apps on your phone, you see how hard it is, and how many apps are actually exposing, or APIs are actually exposing a lot of data there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the challenge also when you look at software development lifecycle, but also tools and services that are out there. I think what is a major challenge in the industry is good defaults, right? And good defaults also from a perspective of security. And I think there's a huge gap, and there's lots to be done for all of us in that industry.
This episode is kindly supported by Fastly, the biggest challenger in the CDN market. Fastly is pushing ahead the technical boundaries and is, from my perspective, the best solution on the market. Fastly is known as one of the key drivers of the Edge Cloud movement. Well-known customers of Fastly are Shopify, the New York Times, Reddit, GitHub, and many, many more. If you want to try it all with first-class support, just go to fastly.com/alphalist. And does it make sense to choose any, proprietary format apart from or proprietary communication channel instead of going with HTTP because it's very easy to sniff, or doesn't that make sense because people will find out anyway?
You have to differentiate between security and obfuscation, right? And I think just using some other protocol is more like in the realm of obfuscation, right? You try to hide it in something that is a bit unknown, right? While there is plenty of tools and plenty of methodologies to make HTTPS communication secure, right? And HTTPS, of course, and making sure you're not subject of a man-in-the-middle attack. You are actually talking to the endpoint you're supposed to talk about, SSL pinning and other methods here. They provide a very secure environment, right? And it is also a well-established and well-researched environment, and many eyes are on that environment. I think it's hard to find another protocol that is that well understood. And from that point of view, that also poses a security risk. You obfuscate, but you don't really understand the protocol that you're using. This is a risk, right?
Yeah, totally understandable. Still, I would argue, or I would ask you, is it possible to have an absolutely secure communication between an app and a server where I can't sniff it anymore with Charles, or I can't do anything with the data?
Yeah, not being able to sniff it with Charles is one thing. Absolute security, doesn't exist, right? There's
obviously, but let's say very moderate to heavy security, because my learning was when I got a bit into that you could also, download in Android's case, just download the APK then if you have certificate pinning, and then you can essentially disable certificate pinning and compile it again, or just change the certificate that you want to have pinned, and just change it to your own and stuff like that. Yeah. Is that still possible everywhere? And
this is why I'm saying the endpoint is the endpoint, or the device is really the hardest part, right? Because you can do exactly what you described, and then you would say, oh, well, then let's add jailbreak detection to the equation, right? Well, guess what? If you're able to open the APK or to manipulate the execution of an application at runtime, which you are able to do on a jailbroken device, then you can also just skip over the jailbreak detection, right? And so that doesn't gain you much, right? It's one layer more, of course, and that's relevant, and that's a viable setup, but it doesn't add up to absolute security. So I would say, this is if you are not in control of the device where this is executing, there is no absolute security, right?
Okay,
and you cannot, right? Because you also don't want to. You want millions of clients, right? So how can you ever be in control of those endpoints, right?
Okay, so but if people want to understand your API, could they download the Android application, decompile it, disable certificate pinning, and just see the API? Maybe it's also good to do that, right? Yeah. Or maybe it's also good to have that in mind and take that as a philosophy. So this is possible. Yeah. We can't get around it. Yeah. So let's live with it, and let's be frugal with the data, right?
Yeah, exactly. So our API is not a secret, right? The API, putting the API between a a wall. A wall is a bad expression, but hiding the API is obfuscation. It doesn't change anything on your security setup, right? You are in the public, and you need people to be able to onboard, to use the app. So it will be possible to understand what this app is actually doing, what kind of calls is the app sending to which kind of endpoint. This cannot be avoided, right? What we focus on is making that a secure connection, making that a secure communication in a controlled and known setup. Hiding the API, I don't think there's a real point to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, understood. Maybe let's continue. As I think it is understandable that it doesn't make sense. And I'd like to know if you have some examples, not necessarily of yourself, of large hacks that are maybe not so well known, where it was around exactly that layer API communication to app. Is there any hack that you can talk about?
I mean, what we see recently, the landscape shifted a bit. Let's say the hack landscape, right? There have been hacks in the past where information that came through an API has been abused in a context of other workflows, information that leaked in an API, but not in the user interface, then has been used in a call to, let's say, customer support or something like that. I mentioned the abuse of some information that was available on Amazon to trick the Apple support into resetting an ID, and there are things like that out there. But what we see recently more often is kind of supply chain attack, right? These are the Microsoft Exchange hack, the SolarWinds hack, the hack that just the most recent one was the Kaseya hack. This is if you follow the news, this is what caused I don't know half the supermarkets in Sweden to shut down for half a day because their cashier their point of sale systems didn't work anymore, right? And this is with supply chain attack. This is you use a certain library, third-party application, or a certain vendor, and actually that vendor is hacked, right? And before that vendor even knows, your system is affected, right? And it's being shut down or it's being encrypted, like ransomware attack style. And if you look at the modern software application, how many libraries are in there, right? If you download any random application from GitHub and look at all the dependencies that are in there, right? What is your control over all those dependencies, right? How do you check them? How do you make sure there are no vulnerabilities? How do you make sure the vulnerabilities that might come up come to your attention, right? And I think this is kind of the new major vector, and we see that in the news, right? We see that in the news. If you look for it, you see that every second week, right? Something like that.
So how do you protect from ransomware then?
First of all, have the vectors. I mean, there are the interfaces I mentioned before. Have your inventory. You need to check all the interfaces. How can you access that interface? What's your first layer protection? What's your second layer protection? What's your third layer protection? You have to look at your vendors, your libraries, your third-party integrations and applications that you use in the context that might have access or might be able to have access to your system. That's one thing. That's avoiding it, and of course that's the goal, avoiding it. And then the next level is remediating it. So what if it really happens? So what if you're really subject to an attack? then you need to have a backup strategy, right? Have your data in a safe place, your application data, your database, whatever data you store in whatever system, in a safe place, such that you can actually recover, and not to kind of the state of last year, but to the state of 15 minutes ago or yesterday or something like that, right? And be able to recover in a timely manner. So whatever timely in the context of your business means, right? And if you talk about the neo broker, timely means pretty fast, right? And that backup also needs to be completely segregated from the system that might actually be subject to a ransomware attack, right? So not being not being subject to the same access vector, not being subject to the same third-party integrations or possibilities to be encrypted, right?
So store it somewhere away from AWS, encrypted without easy access to it, where you maybe need like multiple factors to actually access it again.
Exactly.
And stuff like that. Right?
And have the key not in the system that might be compromised, right?
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. And I guess there are multiple services for that, right? Which you can just rent and you can just Google if you want, or like pre-made setups, or is that not a business right now?
There are backup services, but whenever you talk about a backup service, you're also talking about the vendor again, right? It is again an attack vector, right? So that's really always a decision that you want to make. Can you basically fight the vendor attack vector by adding a new vendor? Might be the case, and in other cases is making use of the system that you have in a smart way to actually achieve what you want to achieve. And many of the cloud providers these days actually have strategies around that. I mean, they are not blind; they see what's going on in out there, right? And they also give you guidelines on what's the best way to remediate those situations.
Or like in crypto, you just store it on a cold wallet, right? You just store it on a tape drive in your living room. And I guess that's your strategy, right?
No comment.
Okay, we turned the video off so I can't see you hiding anything in your living room now.
I don't know. I think it would be quite problematic in many aspects if I would store stuff in my private home.
I guess so. So, I think it was very valuable already. Maybe we come to sum up shortly, but what I wanted to understand is still how big is the team around security in your company?
So we are in various capacities. We have an SRE team, we have a CISO team, we are having a group of senior engineers in the security guild, and we are working all together in different aspects of the system. We have an IT security officer, information security officer. So it's quite an extensive setup there, right? And that's one element. The other element is also creating awareness in the organization, right? So it doesn't help to basically treat security as a feature, right? Security need to be on everybody's mind. And in order to be on everybody's mind, you need to constantly remember people and train people and make them aware of situations that were maybe not so great, right? We have, for example, a software development life cycle that also includes code reviews, pull requests, and we have checklists there also that make clear when you review a piece of code what are the elements also that you must not forget, and you actually have to check that box and look into also aspects of security in that element. We use tools to help us identify possible vulnerabilities, right? Like static code analysis, for example. And of course, we also have external audits, right? We have penetration testers. We have reviews of infrastructure, of code from external auditors that are also done frequently, and are also a tool to raise awareness, because it's also important to get information from the outside, from outside the organization, different viewpoints, different contexts, and also people who are really at the forefront of the offensive side, so to say. So, what are the current attack vectors? What is being discussed in the let's say hacker community these days, right? To also give you that perspective, because if you're a software developer in a product development team, that's not a perspective that you have. That's not something that you're exposed to on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, obviously. And how often do you do these external pen tests?
So pen tests we do on a yearly basis. But we also have checks that are continuously, permanently part of our CI/CD system, right? So static code analysis, for example, but also tools that our cloud provider is offering in terms of vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities of dependencies, vulnerabilities of images, and to have those findings constantly basically checked and reported to the corresponding teams, right?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And you just ask externals whenever you need them in addition, right?
And we also do so there's a yearly penetration testing, right? Really partly automated, but also with quite a significant manual element of trying to break the system. And then there are also from external sources frequent scans every month, basically on the system, also to make sure there's no regression, right?
Yeah, it sounds really like it's if you know your like how to do your homework. And I think it maybe is also good timing on your end. I remember like a few years ago there were like I don't know, that German bank N26 had a huge problem with API security, and a few others that was really like publicly exposed. So I think it sounds as if you did your homework and also learned from others. So that's quite good. If you like, let's say I'm now Joe, and Joe just started as a CTO of a regulated company and is not sure about where to start security wise. If you could just like say like very quickly, just 2 to 3 tips you would give me.
Yeah, that's there's no silver bullet, right? But start with inventory. Start to know your landscape. You're Joe. You just joined the company. What's already there? Is it already live? Is there already something in production? Is it just bootstrapping? Are they just building something up, right? Really do the inventory, know all the interfaces, all the access vectors, all the tools, all the people also working on the system, right? And do that inventory, and then through every single inventory, go ahead and also look for the attack vectors. Do research on every single of those interfaces, and let your team know that you're doing that, right? And that you're really focusing on that piece, right? And then also get an external view, right? So don't rely on yourself, right? You're one person as a CTO joining a startup. You probably have a million things to do, and building a business, building a company, building a culture, hiring people, and that never stops, of course. So get support and get also external support, right? for iView.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That absolutely makes sense. Now, drum roll, I come to my closing question. And I have a little surprise for you. One of your co-founders actually gave me access to a premium feature in Scalable Capital that you at a certain time integrated. And it's often used to abuse the financial market. It's called Time Machine, and it allows you to travel back in time. And I think a few guys already made a few millions with it. It's not what we want to use it for today. So we want to travel back in time with that feature to 2011. And we can just meet you there and see you there. You just finished at University in ETH Zurich. And now you have the chance to hit pause, and you have the chance to whisper something into young Andreas' ears. What would it be?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there are probably many many things to be done and to be said, right? But in the end, I think, just go on and do what you think is right? So I think life turned out quite great for me privately and in business. Work for a great company. We built a great business, a great engineering team. I live a happy life with my wife and my 3 kids here in Munich. So if I look back in 2011, I applied for example, I applied with BMW, right? I didn't really make it through that process, right? I was pretty upset. But looking back, I mean, I could tell myself what to say. Or I could just say, no, go on, I mean, it turned out just great.
That sounds as if you're quite happy and confident.
And maybe buy some Amazon stock and mine some crypto.
Yeah, but you can still use that feature in the future. So maybe that's also why you're not telling yourself anything.
I actually do remember that I was that I wanted to try to mine some crypto, but then I didn't really do it. I don't know for which reason, but. And probably in the meantime, I would spend it probably for buying pizza and beer. But, mining a few hundred bitcoins back then and keeping it all the way until now would have been quite an interesting move. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks a lot, Andreas. It was a lot of fun talking to you, and I hope we soon have the chance again. And maybe even meet in person at a certain time. Let's hope that the pandemic is over soon. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot for the invite. It was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope we'll see you again in a post-Corona time. Thank you.